It's 3:05, Monday, January 11th. My name is Garrett Sims, and welcome back to the podcast. We got a lot of sports to talk about. So much breaking news after some playoff drama. See what I did there? I put my title at the beginning, so that way it'd be like, it's kind of cool. I think it was genius. I'm currently back at college. This is going to be the setup from here on out. I'm kind of excited about it. Makes me happy. Got my roommate here in the background. So much stuff to talk about. I feel like what we got to talk about first is the biggest news of the day. The Eagles fired Doug Peterson, and this has so much implication on what the Eagles organization is going to be. They knew kind of coming in that they weren't going to have Wentz if Peterson was still there. So to fire Peterson gives Wentz the chance of coming back. And I think whatever coach comes in knows the situation they're going to have to deal with. Now, if I were the Eagles, I would stick with Jalen Hurts and I would just get rid of Carson. I really would. I think you get more draft capital for him. I think you get draft capital for Jalen too, especially for a team like the Texans who might be looking for a quarterback. We'll get into that later. But that's big news. I don't think it's really a shock after he threw that game against the football team. Kind of shocked the entire football world. And I think a lot of people, wanted Peterson's job to be done after that, especially Eagles fans, a lot of Giants fans, and NFL lovers everywhere that don't want to see the integrity of our game ruined. So there's that. We're going to go into the next thing. We're going to talk about Deshaun Watson, another quarterback in distress. And if you don't know, I talked about his situation a little bit, but last time I talked about more things have came up. We found out more about the situation. So what happened is their owner said, listen, Deshaun, we're going to listen to your input. We're going to let you decide and help pick our GM. We're going to let you pick our coach, which isn't a bad thing. But I'm also one of those people that say, like, quarterbacks shouldn't be able to do that. And that's the problem I cross with the NBA all the time, is that the players have too much control on who their coach and who their GM is. And that's why you see a lot more dysfunctional basketball teams because of it. And so, I thought it was cool that they said, Deshaun, listen, like, we'll take your input. So that he wanted a couple, I think, a guy named Omar Khan, and he wanted Lewis Reddick to be the GM. And I don't know whether the Texans interviewed them or not. I'm guessing they didn't because Deshaun was very mad that they hired the Patriots guy, Nick Garcia or something like that. And that really upset Watson. And Watson wanted Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs to be their head coach. Well, the Texans didn't interview him, and there's a reason why they didn't interview him. Eric Bieniemy wants nothing to do with that job. So Deshaun's sitting here trying to say, I want Bieniemy, and if you're not going to give me Bieniemy, then I want to trade. But Bieniemy wants nothing to do with the job. So I think you have to look at the situation you're in. And there's a lot of rumors going around. Nothing's for sure. Deshaun said he'll play a tough card, maybe not play, hold out, do something like that if they won't trade him. A lot of the places they're thinking about sending him right now is I think the Dolphins are at the top of the list. If I were them, I'd keep him. You have to sit down and say, listen, we know that you had a bad year. Like, you probably had your worst year in the league. I think they were 4-12. But look, they went to the playoffs his first 2 years. He did get injured. So, I mean, what more? One down year because of a head coach move that destroyed your team. The head coach did that, not the owner. So I don't see why there's a reason to get all mad at your owner and play a little drama card, because it's stupid. It's really stupid, and this is why I hate the NBA, and I don't want to see the NFL start letting the players have more power. And if Deshaun wants to get traded, I would sit there and I would trade him to somewhere he isn't going to win. I would trade him to the Lions. I wouldn't trade him to the Vikings, but I would trade him somewhere where he has absolutely no chance of being successful, because that's the power they have in the NFL. Okay, we'll trade you, but you're not going to go to where you want to go. We'll send you to the Lions. We'll send you to the Jets. Then see how you like that, buddy. But I think Watson's a tremendous talent. It's just going to be interesting. I heard one report saying that they're not going to get rid of him. They'd be too stupid to get rid of him. And I think that's true. I think if you let a guy like that go, you're just asking for more problems. And they're saying Tua and some draft picks and stuff like that to the Texans for Deshaun Watson, and I don't think that's plausible. I mean, that's just from a fan standpoint. Yeah, trade a quarterback for a quarterback and maybe some draft picks, and it's perfect. And put a ribbon on top of it too, and then guess what? It's perfect. Well, there's somebody that played football in me that says that's not the right way to go about it. Somebody that studies football, not just watching the games, but seeing how players react to certain situations. And that's the last thing that you want to do to Tua Tagovailoa. You don't want to send him and put him in a situation where, the Dolphins weren't that confident in you. They had the closer in Ryan Fitzmagic. And so we're not confident in you. We're just going to send you to the Texans. Like that's just a terrible, terrible way to start your career. It's going to start looking like Josh Rosen. So I don't think that's the way to go. We'll see how it comes out in the next coming days. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think they'd be stupid to. And if they do, I think the Lions are more of a fit. Won't threaten you if you do trade for a quarterback or you can get a quarterback. Won't threaten you because he's on the opposite side. It's not going to benefit him because he'll be playing for the Lions. And if anybody's like, oh, the Lions are good, well, you're delusional. Because the Lions haven't been good for a very long time, and a quarterback isn't going to change that. They're probably going to lose their top wide receiver in free agency, so send him there. That's what I do. Send him there. No, I'm not all about this prima donna quarterback drama. That's what I probably should have named it. Prima donna quarterback drama. That sounds great. Might change that. My favorite matchup from this weekend was the Titans and the Ravens. For one reason, because I think it boiled down to this equation. What's Lamar Jackson going to give you, and what is Derrick Henry going to give you? And if anybody watched that game, you saw how it unfolded. It wasn't very surprising. And, something passed my eye test. You got an eye test when you watch football. And it's like you can tell more with your eyes than statistics can tell you. And I'll go into you'll see what I'm going with this. You'll see exactly where I'm going with this. But Lamar Jackson has an X factor to him. He literally does. Madden padded in the term X factor, and everybody's like, it's a Madden thing. Like, so many times we've seen in that game yesterday, Lamar Jackson just take over the game. And he did. The offense wasn't going, we're dropping passes, weren't getting very good run holes, and all of a sudden Lamar drops back to pass, and guess what? He's taking off for 50 yards down the field. And there's very few players I think have that X Factor mode. And Lamar Jackson is an X Factor game changer, man. That's the one thing you have to take away from this, is that he can do what he wants when he wants because he is so good. And is obviously the best quarterback out of that draft class. I'm sorry, Josh Allen, but it's the truth. But, I mean, then again, you can't judge him for being two different archetypes. And then you flip the script and you look at what the Titans did. And the Titans didn't play awful. Their defense had probably played the best it did all year, and they held the Titans to 20 points. And to hold the Titans to 20 points when they were on a hot streak of scoring upwards of 24-30, pretty good. So they played their best game all year, and that's what Tennessee needed them to do. Just couldn't pull it off. And you look at Derrick Henry, I think he ran for 40 yards. And this has always been what I said about the Titans. The Titans cannot win games when Derrick Henry does not play good. And I know what you're telling me. Ryan Tannehill's a top 10 quarterback. The statistics may lead you to believe that, but my eye test doesn't tell me that. A year ago in the playoffs, I made it to the AFC Championship game because Derrick Henry had literally ran all over the Ravens, made Earl Thomas his blocker, and for Ryan Tannehill, he made passes that he had to win. And everybody said, oh, he didn't even throw for 100 yards. But he can when he needs to. Well, in that AFC Championship game, he was tasked. The Titans looked at him and said, listen, we need you to go win us this ball game. Derrick Henry's getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage. They are preparing for our run. They want you to beat them. They want you, Ryan Tannehill, to beat them. And guess what he couldn't do? He couldn't do it. The Titans play the Ravens this year, and we all know how that went. But Derrick Henry stopped for 40 yards. They're bringing guys down in the box, and they're saying, run the ball. We'll stop you. So they're saying, okay, we'll let you pass it. But Ryan Tannehill, you are not going to beat us. We are going to make you beat us, and we know you can't. When it happens one time, it's kind of like, oh, it happened. And there's been multiple. So when it happened against the Chiefs, it's like, okay, you know what? Listen, it was one time. Tannehill's fine. Well, guess what? It happened again. So now there's that doubt that comes with it. Now there's that reputation, that narrative brewing that Tannehill can't win when Derrick Henry doesn't play good. Ryan Tannehill cannot win a game by himself. And we won't know until next year if they make the playoffs if Tannehill can do that because they signed him to an extension. If you remember, and this happens a lot more, but I'm going back to the Chiefs here. I don't want to just talk about the Chiefs. But Alex Smith, when he first came, I think it was in 2013, Andy Reid came to, and it was building to win a Super Bowl. They got to the playoffs. They lost to the wild card. Then they won a wild card, made it to the divisional, lost in the divisional. And after the Chiefs lost in the playoffs with Alex Smith, that last time I think it was they lost to the Titans, there was that doubt that crept in. That there was a reputation, a narrative brewing that Alex Smith was a game manager. He wasn't a game changer. He was a game manager. And Kansas City had to look hard in the mirror and say, listen, can this guy get us over this hump? Well, Smith couldn't even beat the Titans, who they should have beat. So then they go and draft a guy named Patrick Mahomes, a game changer. They go to the AFC Championship game. They win a Super Bowl the next year. And I'm not saying by any means that you should just hop off the Tannehill bandwagon and start looking for a quarterback, because that's not what I mean. Every now and again, I think we jump off the horse a little too prematurely. They got to give Tannehill one more year. They got to get him a little bit better defense. They got to fix that defense because they have no pass rush. They got to fix the offense a little bit. You need something other than Derrick Henry. If you can get some better wide receivers, because they're going to need that. Tannehill needs that. I mean, A.J. Brown's good, but when you can just double team A.J. Brown and then force it to throw it to Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis, who aren't great wide receivers, then it makes your job a little bit harder. So I'm not saying bail on the idea of Tannehill. I'm just saying there's a narrative brewing. And I've said this for the longest time. Tannehill can't win games when Derrick Henry doesn't play good. And maybe that's because of the lack of weapons they have or the fact that they don't have a defense. So give it another year, see what happens. I think we all got to see what happens. I think it's a little bit prematurely, but I'm starting to believe more and more that my eye test is telling me that he can't win those games. Unfortunate for him, but that was my most interesting. I thought that was going to be the most interesting. It wasn't. I thought there was one that was a little bit better, but I'm going to go to the most boring one. I barely watched it because I thought it was terrible. It was a game that was streamed on Nickelodeon, if that tells you anything. And actually, the Nickelodeon broadcast made the game a little bit more presentable to watch because it was boring. And that was the Bears and the Saints. And, there's not a lot you can take away from that. Michael Thomas is back. Alvin Kamara is good. And Drew Brees does what Drew Brees does best and beat teams that he needs to beat. It worries me a little bit that they only scored 3 touchdowns, but then again, you look at the Bears defense that virtually carried them, in my opinion, to a playoff berth. And it's no shock that they only scored 3. They're really a great defense, just overshadowed by some better ones. And The Bears, there's just a lot of head scratching. I'm not going to get into that. There's just got to be some head scratching, and they got a lot to figure out because they made the playoffs, and I've always been told of these things called false positives. They made the playoffs, but for me, it felt like a false positive. Like the Washington football team, I was like, that's a false positive. But then you look at them how they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm like, starting to think a little bit. They deserve to be there. Take away a couple games, and you're like, you know what? They deserve to be in there, especially when Alex Smith is in. But you go and look at that game, and the Bears defense was the only reason that they were in it. You seen a couple drop catches. Some guy got ejected for punching the same guy that instigated it last time. So you don't learn from your mistakes. I just think, you got a lot to go in the offseason if you're Chicago, and you got to say, listen, like, we need to start looking for a quarterback because old Mitch Trubisky ain't it. I mean, I hate to say any guy doesn't deserve a chance, or you don't want to root against anybody, but man, he's just not it. He came back in, and they did a little bit better, but your team deserves a little bit better because now what's happening, because you don't have a quarterback, because Nick Foles ain't the answer either. Now you're starting to see that Matt Nagy's looking bad. And the last thing you want to do, it's just so much taken. They got to start looking at head coaches, quarterbacks. They need weapons. They're about to lose their best wide receiver because they can't sign him to an extension, and they undervalue him a lot. And Allen Robinson, he'll probably go somewhere. So I think they said he was going to go to Miami. That doesn't surprise me. Go work with young Tua, or maybe Deshaun Watson. But there's not a lot I can take away from that game. Is what it is. It was terrible. It was pretty much how I think every person that watches football thought it would go. Then you go and look at the late game last night, and my goodness, you went from absolute blah, boring nothing to this shocking start by the Cleveland Browns. Like, I didn't think that they could play that well. Like, and they kind of got gifted a couple of them. Like, the Steelers had beat themselves for the most part. And you started to see when Pittsburgh actually played like a team, were actually starting to win the game. It's just when Big Ben shot himself in the foot and the team shot themselves in the foot is when you started to see, like, oh, Cleveland's doing something. And I don't mean that in any negative manner towards the Browns, because they played a hell of a game and you can't take anything away from them. They're definitely going to be a threat in the playoffs. But what they have to understand is not every game's going to be like that. And people around football had talked for months. Listen, the Steelers are not as good as you think they are. They have some flaws. And it wasn't on defense. It was all on offense. Big Ben, if he didn't get the ball out by a certain time, he wasn't completing passes. And he needed to complete those short ones to go deep. He needed the run game to be there to go deep. And so when they were 11-0, they started hopping on their high horse and was like, you know what, we're the best team in the NFL. And it's like I said, you cannot let stats take you away from what your eyes tell you. You got to trust your gut and what your eyes tell you and what you see, because what I saw versus what their record showed was two different things. They finished they finished 12-4. They were a 12-4 team that played like a 9-7. You want to take it maybe an 8-8 team. But they had a lot of holes. They couldn't run the ball, and they were just lucky that they were playing bad teams. And I looked at their schedule, and I said, listen, they'll probably lose against the Colts. They will lose against the Bills. They'll probably lose against the Browns again. And it kind of shocked me that the Bengals did, but that just proves to show you how many holes they had to fill on offense. The Bengals defense played tremendous. And the offense did enough to beat the Steelers. But I knew going into that game, Steelers-Browns, the playoff game, because I'm starting to lose track here, that I thought Pittsburgh was going to win, but I thought they were going to kind of win by the skin of their teeth. Like, they played good enough to beat the Browns because the Browns are quote-unquote the Browns. But I think they just beat themselves up too much. You go to the flip side. Browns played great defense. They were in Big Ben's face the entire time. They got good enough, such a great lead that they could play back and play cover two, and then they could have two people over top and force Big Ben to make bad throws and then get lucky. And they picked it a couple times. They got a couple lucky picks. They were gifted a couple points. But you've seen their offense struggle at times. You've seen their offense perform at its best when they were running the ball very well. So it's going to be an interesting matchup between them and KC because they played last year, and the teams were relatively about the same. Minus Odell was on that team last year, but other than that, it's kind of the same look. If you get what I'm saying, so I'm not going to take any favorites right now. I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see what Mahomes is going to do off 2 weeks of rest. I think that's always important. Like sometimes 1 week of rest, perfect. Sometimes 2 is a little bit too much. You don't know if they're going to come out and they're going to stifle or they're going to play great. But they should be healthy. And a healthy Chiefs team is scary. And I think another factor you have to play in the last night's game, they played each other 3 times. When you play a team 3 times in such a condensed part, you know what they're going to do. So the Browns had every bit of idea what they were going to do against the Steelers and what the Steelers were going to do to them, and Steelers probably felt the same way. And I seriously thought with their head coach being out, I was like, ooh, there's no way they're winning this game. But Stefanski's got to feel pretty good about his squad right now going into the next game. I just don't know if it's going to be enough. And the other interdivision game happened on Saturday, Seattle versus the Rams. And this was another game where I think we learned a lot. I think there's a lot to take away about both teams. The Rams defense is good. I think we all knew that. I think the Jets kind of caught lightning in a bottle winning 2 games. They got lucky playing the Browns because the Browns were just hurt. And just think some things happened to old Jared Goff. And, I just think some things happened to the Rams where they kind of fell apart at times. Things didn't go their way. I think Jared Goff was out that game if I'm right, because it was trying to think. No, they didn't. That was before he got hurt. So I mean, Jared Goff played that game. He didn't play well, and turnovers were a big deal. So you really go back and you look at the Seattle game, and like I said, when you play a team 3 times, you start to pick up on things. Like Seattle isn't going to beat you using the same trickery because you know what they're going to do. They're not going to beat you with DK Metcalf because you know what DK Metcalf is going to do. Not to mention you have Jalen Ramsey, the greatest physical corner playing football right now. I mean, that dude has locked up, I know, 2 of the best wide receivers, DK and D-Hop. I mean, D-Hop only had like 7 catches for like 28 yards against Jalen. So, John Wolford, I hope he's doing okay. I never really heard what happened to him. I know they said they took him to the hospital, but Jared Goff comes in on cue and is basically like Superman coming into the night because he just performs well. Doesn't turn over the ball, makes the throws he needs to throw. The run game was there. The defense played tremendous. I mean, they beat a Seattle Seahawks team that their defense was their strength, and their defense isn't that good. The offense has been struggling. I mean, and I seen an interesting thing on social media today. Somebody said, we consider Russell Wilson elite because of his 2013 championship. And, I started thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? I think that's right. Because you look at Russ's numbers, and they were good to start the season. I think he was 28-6 touchdown to interception ratio through the first half of the season. And then the second half wasn't as great. But do we start overvaluing Russell Wilson because he won a championship so young in his career? Because he brought up a great point. That the NFL is what can you do for me now league. And what has Russell Wilson done for them? He won them a division title, but he couldn't win against the Rams in the playoffs. You go back to last year, 49ers won the division. Seattle beat a Philly team because Javian Clowney speared Carson Wentz in the back of the head and then lost to the Packers, who got wiped out by the 49ers. And you start asking yourself that question, what has Russell Wilson done? And I get, you can say, oh, well, he doesn't have the wide receivers that Patrick Mahomes does, that Aaron Rodgers does, that Tom Brady does. He's got DK Metcalf. He's got Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf isn't the best one, but Tyler Lockett for a 2? Other than Chris Godwin, I argue Tyler Lockett's the best 2 in the league. So I think, nobody's ever going to say that Russell Wilson's not as good as what they think he are, because he's such a great guy. He's such a great quarterback. He does have a game changer factor to him where, like, you keep him close in the fourth quarter of the game, he'll go down and he'll get you a touchdown and he'll win the game. But it just seemed like that game that the Rams just kept pulling further and further. And you're like, okay, Russell's going to do it. Russell's going to go score. Russell's going to be fine. And it didn't happen. So I think there's going to be a little bit overrated factor to the Seahawks. I think there's that with Russell Wilson. You can't take anything away that they've done this season. But when you lose to the Rams, and I get it, you played them 3 times. And you split the series. So this one was kind of like for the bragging rights, for all the chips. And as Jalen Ramsey said, you can take that hat and T-shirt and go to Cabo. But the one thing that I looked in this game, I said, maybe the Seahawks have a lot more to fix on offense. Maybe they need a run game. I know they need a little bit more defense. But they don't feel like the same Seahawks team that they were a couple of years ago, like this vibrant, flashy, can make plays team. And it's really weird. Super weird. I'm gonna take a quick little break. Get a water bottle. So thank you. And I'll be back here in a minute. Okay, I'm back. So if you guys remember the last time, I don't know whoever watched the last video. I don't know who did and who didn't. But I specifically shouted out Bang because I was drinking my Bang because I was about to go work out. I'm very disappointed because I checked my emails, my business email, and there was nothing from Bang. I was like, dude, I actually love your product. I said, just because I have 7 views a stream doesn't mean that I don't get a, I feel like I should deserve. Oh my goodness, see, this is what happens when I drink my pre-workout, but I deserve a freaking sponsorship. I was sitting there and I was just waiting. I was like, Friday passes, Saturday passes, Sunday, then it's Monday, and I'm like, no, nothing from Bang. So what I'm gonna do, Ghost, absolutely love your product, absolutely love it. I would be stoked if you let me sponsor your drink. And hear me out, you don't even have to pay me. I'll sponsor it. And then once I get famous, then you guys can start giving me money or whatever. So there's my little tidbit for that. So you're going to see as I start drinking this, I'm going to start, you're going to see my speech get a little bit worse. Start getting a little jittery and stuff like that. But I'll even drink it because I love drinking it. I got the Sonic Cherry Limeade. Delicious. Like, I see guys on TikTok all the time. They're like it almost looks like they're forced to drink the Bang. Like, they'll look at you and they'll be like, "Man, I don't even like this." Like, I'm just saying, somebody come sponsor me. I love Ghost Bang. I love your guys' product. So Tampa Bay played the Washington football team, and I think this was the biggest shock to me because I felt like the Browns could win the game. I didn't think they'd win it that bad, but this one was a shock to me because I turn on the game and I'm like, Taylor Heineke, where's Alex Smith? That's just because I could be a caveman in the cave sometimes and just be like, oh, I wasn't paying attention, didn't know that he was starting. So I automatically told myself, I was like, wow, Washington is going to lose this game. And I'm watching, and Tom Brady goes down the field, and I think they get a field goal. Then they get a touchdown. And then Washington starts answering back, and it's a really back and forth game that came down to the final drive. It felt like Tampa Bay dominated, but the Heineke guy, he made – I mean, there's a lot of credit that goes out there. But it was a back and forth game, and it all came down to one final drive. And that's when Tampa Bay's defense stepped up and sacked him a couple times. I think they got kind of lost on a call there. They weren't exactly 100% sure. They said it was a catch and a fumble, so I think they kind of got gypped out of that. And you want to talk about bad calls, we'll talk about that later too. But I think I got gypped out of that. But you just got to take away some things, and you got to say, listen, like that Taylor Heineke guy played a heck of a game. For probably not knowing when he was going to start from what he had offensively versus what Tom Brady had, impressive. And I was sitting there the entire game, and we seen Tom Brady not shake hands. Like, Tom Brady loses to the most weird quarterbacks ever. He lost to Nick Foles in the Super Bowl, won't shake Nick Foles' hand when he loses. That's just insane. Like, that's just who Tom Brady loses to. He loses to these weird quarterbacks. And I was like, oh, Taylor Heineke. I was like, huh. You put it all together. Like, you lost Nick Foles. You lost to a couple other backups. And then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, my God, he could lose again to a guy named Taylor Heineke. And who went viral for the video saying, dude, I'm a baller. And Chase Young's like, Heineke? And that dude balled. That dude totally balled. I think he threw an interception, but I don't even think it was really, truly his fault. And it was the right throw, and I think it got tipped, and then the cornerback came in. I think it was Murphy Bunting came in, got lucky, picked it. But, I mean, you really take away that. I mean, it was an amazing performance. And then you look at the matchup, the Saints, the Buccaneers. And now you got to start asking, so I'm going to go look forward to this. Drew Brees versus Tom Brady the third time in a year. When you play teams for a third time in a year, anything can happen. And normally, I'm going to put this in terms of street racing. If you're sitting there and this dude beats you, and he beats you by, say, 2 car lengths, you're like, okay, I'll get him the next time. Then you race him a second time, and he beats you by a bus length. Then you're sitting there, and you're scratching your head, and you're saying, oh, I don't even want to race him a third time. And I think that's how – I know that's not how Tom Brady feels, but I feel like that should be kind of the thought of how they are. Like, we were close beating him in week 1, week 2. We got gapped by a country mile. And now you're like, dude, this is the exact team we don't want to face. Like, we take our chance against the Packers. We don't want to take our chance against the Saints because the Saints have our number. And Tom Brady is such a good quarterback that I think he can get those guys rallied. And I think it's going to be a little bit closer of a game. But the Saints are going to have Kamara. They're going to have Michael Thomas. They're going to have Drew Brees all on the same page. The defense has been playing good. I don't know. You play somebody 3 times, anything can happen. But if I'm the Buccaneers, that's the last team you wanted to see in the playoffs. Truly the last team you wanted to see. And we're going to flip over to the first game that was played on Super Wild Card Weekend. Bills, Colts. I thought it was going to be a blowout. It wasn't a blowout. Came down to the last drive. Phillip Rivers. Interesting to see what his future holds, especially for a team that I think needs him, especially with what could happen with Wentz. Allen played really well. Phillip Rivers played really well. He did a great job getting the ball to the tight ends. And you start looking at that, and you're like, okay, Phillip Rivers has something cooking. And you're like, this was the vice versa of the Tennessee game. The Colts have ran the ball well, and that was a big reason for their success. But then the Bills dared Phillip Rivers to throw it. And Philip Rivers stepped up to – that's the difference between Philip Rivers and Tannehill. When they say Rivers, go win us a game, Rivers has enough magic from left in his prime. Like, he can go do it. Frank Reich can say, Rivers, go win us this game. And he got pretty gosh darn close. It came down to what I thought was a bad call on Zach Pascal's part. And it was a bad call by the refs because the game should have been over. It was clearly a fumble. But then fans were like, why didn't you just stay down? Like, I was like, why don't you just stay down? I'm sitting there and I'm saying, stay down, know the situation, get the ball in. You're going to save yourself more time. Now, granted, if you got up and you got a few more yards, it's like you got a few more yards, but you just wasted a whole bunch of time off the clock. And if he had got up and scored a touchdown, you'd be like, oh my God, that dude's genius. But I just think you got to know the magnitude. Save yourself a couple seconds, get up, get the ball in, get it to the ref. Maybe you get a play where you can run a slant and get a couple more yards and set yourself up in field goal position. I just thought it was a bad job on his part about not knowing the situation he's in. Not great football IQ there. And people are going to be like, oh, well, maybe you're not the smartest guy, and maybe I'm not, because I'm not saying I'm a rocket scientist, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like in that situation, get up, get the ball, spike it, then you're going to preserve some more time. Now with the fumble deal, and I don't know, and the Bills really did get gypped because his knee was clearly off the ground, but since they had kind of already made the call and it was really hard, the one camera angle was hard, but then hard to tell. And then there was the other one where you're like, oh, you know what? He was down. He was down. Like, oh, see, this is what happens. He was like down, and then they were like, is he down? Was the hand on? And I thought one you could tell clearly. See, now I'm starting to get jittery. That's really weird. Gotta get back into the situation. And so the Bills will play the Ravens, and it comes down to those are the two best teams. Those are the two hottest teams in the AFC. The Chiefs weren't playing that well, and the Browns really were kind of up and down, and they won a big game against two big games against Pittsburgh. But those were the two hottest teams, and I think that could be the best game. I feel like that's one that you could turn on, and it could be the best game. You're going to have to go and look at, on the NFC side, you got the Saints versus Buccaneers. I think that's going to be a very good game. And then you got the Packers versus the Rams. And if you look at how the Packers are set up, it's basically a better version of the Seattle offense. Really good one wide receiver. Like, you go look up and down. Seahawks, DK Metcalf. Well, Devontae Adams is better. So Packers get the wide receiver. Quarterback, I think right now, better quarterback, Packers. Better running back, Packers. Better tight end, Packers. Better defense, Packers. But you look at how well the Rams matched up to the Seahawks. Jalen Ramsey is going to take – they got a great secondary. So I feel like that could be the downfall for Aaron Rodgers, is that they don't have a great or that the secondary is so good and their receiving core is kind of you look at it and you're like, they got Devontae Adams, but what happens if they put Jalen Ramsey on Devontae Adams? Who else is there? You got Lazard. You got Valdez-Scantling. And you're just kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I like that matchup so much. Run game-wise, really good D-line that the Rams have. So I feel like this is going to be one where who's the offense that is going to overcome the defense? Because the Packers' defense is good, but I don't know if the Rams' offense can overcome that. So I think the Packers win. I think it's close. And I would love to see a rematch. Like the Saints, if the Saints can win, I would love to see a Saints-Rams rematch and the Saints finally getting back in. That'd be amazing. I'm so undecided on the NFC. Like the AFC, I could say, the Bills and the Chiefs could win, and they very well could win. It's so I feel like these matchups are good. I feel like other than the Chiefs-Browns matchup, every other matchup is really, really good. they're all going to be very good games to watch. But you just look at the Chiefs Browns, and I don't think they match up well. I feel like the Browns defense isn't that good. They just kind of got lucky because the Steelers weren't that great either. Like the Steelers were a turd that was polished really, really well and just got lucky that they got off to such a great start. So that's all the football I'm going to talk. I'm going to throw food for thought. I'm back at college. Let me know what you want to see, like what you want to hear. Like if we feel like the sports thing isn't working out, because sometimes like my brain's fried. Like my brain is totally fried today. I mean, I had, and I know you're probably like, oh, you go to college, you probably have like 2 hours worth of classes. I do have only 2 hours, but it's just a lot getting back and moving back in and stuff like that, and then getting back into the field. So like everything's really fried for me right now. So I apologize if I said anything that sounded completely stupid. Part of it's just staying fresh and doing stuff like that. But I think it's been interesting in sports, So you're just gonna wrap up. Let me know what you guys want to see. There is a game tonight. I'm not going to talk about it other than I'm going to say it's Alabama versus Ohio State because I've already said how I feel about college football playoffs. It's one of those deals like sometimes you catch your lightning in a bottle. I'll say that a lot. Sometimes you do. And I think that's kind of what Ohio State did. I'm not saying they got lucky. I'm just saying they got the right circumstances to beat Clemson. And now you just kind of look at it and you look at Alabama versus Ohio State. Better quarterback, Ohio State. Everything else, Alabama. So I would love for Ohio State to win. It'd be amazing. It'd be great. I think that'd be so cool for them to win. But my gut reaction tells me that Alabama's going to win. They got the better head coach too. You throw that in there as well. I mean, Nick Saban's just a generational coach. You won't see. I mean, you might see some coaches that are like like Dabo, but there's no Nick Saban. Nick Saban's so good. So that's it. That's my food for thought. That's everything. We'll get back to the other things that we want to do and stuff like that. It's been a rough weekend and stuff like that, and now my brain's kind of fried, so I need to get to working out because I need to get back to working out. That helps clear my mind. I might talk a little bit about BYFL tomorrow. Like if you guys don't, I kind of had a good BYFL story, but I love talking about it because we just take it so serious. I can give you a little updates on the games and stuff like that. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. This has been the podcast with Garrett Sims. So excited to be back. So excited to be in my room again and have a good setup and know that I can just record every day. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you guys for listening. I'm going to keep doing this, and we'll see you next time.